Hi, my name is Katie Daigle. I am the climate and environment editor at Reuters, and I'm here with U.S. Special Presidential Envoy on Climate Change, John Kerry. Thank you so much for joining me.
Glad to be with you.
So we were just talking. We were both in Glasgow for the UN climate conference. A lot of eyes are on that, and you, of course, put a lot of work into securing a deal there. I think you've been crisscrossing the world for the last 2 years, campaigning with all these countries. But the pact at the end left a lot of people cold. International ambition still isn't quite what it needs to be to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And so I'm wondering, from your perspective, are you worried about where we are and how we're going to, get to where we need to be, or are these efforts going to have been in vain?
Well, I am worried about it, Katie, for the obvious reasons. This is an enormous lift to do what we have to do. And there are massive forces arrayed, not necessarily against it, but in some cases against it. In other cases, just like an ocean liner, often people refer, like a freighter. It takes a long time for the ship to turn, even after you've turned the wheel. And that's where we are. We have to be doing everything faster. We have to be phasing out coal plants 5 times faster than we are. We have to be planting trees 5 times faster than we are. We have to be deploying renewable energy 6 times faster. We have to be putting electric cars on the road 22 times faster. Those are the estimates of the International Energy Agency that is telling us what we need to do in order to hit 1.5 degrees or to maintain it. Now, the good thing about Glasgow, we came out of there with about 70% of the planet's GDP committed to keep 1.5 degrees alive. And when I say committed, I mean with real plans on the table in their NDCs that they will follow to get there. But that also means that you have 35% or 30% that is not there. And that means you have China, India, Russia, Brazil, Mexico, Indonesia, South Africa, a group of countries that are going to have to step up, and we have to help them. This is not just an unloaded responsibility on them. The task now is to implement all of the agreements which were reached in Glasgow. And there were many things reached in Glasgow which can advance the process.
So where do the next pledges that you think need to come from? Where do they come from, and how do we get there? I mean, are you speaking with specific countries on specific measures we'd like to see that could be low-hanging fruit or easier for them to tackle?
Yes, we are talking with specific countries. Let me give you an example. India has a very large reliance on coal, but India is also hugely engaged here and very much seized by this issue. And Prime Minister Modi has been very forward-leaning. India has made a commitment to try to deploy 450 gigawatts of renewable energy over the next 10 years. And when they have done that, India will be in compliance with keeping 1.5 degrees alive. So that's a big shift for India. And I know, because I've talked with industrialists and others in India, they're committed to try to get there. They're serious about it. And so we are going to work with other countries to help bring finance and technology to the table in order to try to accelerate this process. And that kind of partnership that we have forged with India is the kind of thing we want to do with these other countries I've talked about. Nobody wants to just sort of wash your hands and walk away. We all have to be part of helping others to get where we need to go. And it's not a finger pointing exercise. It's an aggregating exercise, bringing people together, working hard to achieve what is a common interest, a common goal.
So it's interesting that you say that regarding India, because of course India in the end was the chief challenger of the language of the pact and asked for a watering down from phasing out coal to phasing down. Politically, that wasn't necessarily so surprising, but as you say, they do politically, internally, domestically have engagement. They have a plan to reach, to decarbonize.
Well, in fairness,
what was that about?
Well, in fairness to India, and I think it's important to be fair, um, India has unabated coal. That is what they have built their economy on because they haven't had other choices and because they are a developing country. And so it's a difficult road. And what we need to do is, as I said, not point fingers, but join hands and work together with India to help the transition to be able to be accelerated and to take place. So really what India was doing was saying, look, we can't say we're going to phase out something that actually is the core of our economy at this point in time. And yet India was helpful in a number of other ways in helping to get us to achieve things we needed to achieve. So I think what's important here, they signed on to phasing down, and so did China. And the fact is, you have to phase down to get to phasing out. And so for these countries, I think it's important for us to now work with them to accelerate the phase down, which ultimately, as long as there's an alternative energy source that is reliable and secure, I think India and other countries are ready to adopt that. So that's where the global community has to come to the table. One of the things we need to do, which people are not paying enough attention to, is push the curve of innovation and of creativity. Um, that is what is really going to ultimately help us get where we need to go. And we can't rely on a next generation technology, but we have to push for it, even as we rely on current level of technology to deploy in order to make the transition. So for instance, current technology of solar, current technology of wind is cheaper than coal, and it is able to provide extraordinary amounts of energy to countries around the world already. There are some countries at 75, 80% of their energy mix, 90% is coming from renewables. And as we go forward, I think whether it's storage, battery storage, or other kinds of storage, long-term storage, or direct air carbon capture, or CCUS, which is carbon capture, utilization, and storage. If we come up with, a breakthrough in any of those areas, those begin to become game changers in this transition. So the IEA, again, and I thank them for having been really important, made important contributions to the dialogue over the last year or so, and before, but particularly in the last year. The IEA tells us that about 50% of the reduction in emissions that we need to achieve over the next 10 years will come from technologies that are not yet at scale. So there are some 46 or so critical technologies. 42 of them were behind where we ought to be in their development. So that is a major, major push for every country in the world to pursue these new technologies where they have the capacity. And I know that President Biden is very focused on this as part of his legislation that he's trying to get through the Congress right now.
Which do you think are the most important technologies to watch?
Well, I think I mentioned several of them. I mean,
yeah,
green hydrogen is really critical. I mean, a lot of people are putting a big bet on green hydrogen, blue hydrogen. Clearly, if we can provide hydrogen at an affordable level, doing the separating of the water and the hydrogen and creating the fuel, that will be an enormous step forward. Storage, battery storage, or long-term storage. I mean, that's a huge breakthrough. If we get a week storage or more, that's a game changer. I mean, we've won the battle in essence. We have a fallback, if you will. I think that the small modular reactors in nuclear, even though a lot of people say, "Oh my God, no, we can't think about nuclear." Well, the fact is that, the United States Navy for 60 or 70 years now has run ships on small nuclear micro plants, and we've never lost a sailor, we've never had a spill, we've never had an accident, no meltdown, et cetera. So it can be done safely and in a contained way. And there are people doing a lot of work now. Look at Bill Gates, for instance, is pursuing with his breakthrough initiative, whether or not there are better new ways to do that. He's building a prototype, small modular reactor. Others are pursuing it. Other countries are deciding to double down on nuclear. I know France is making a big bet on it. I think Britain may. So
Will the U.S.?
U.S. has it as part of its mix. Absolutely, it is part of the mix here.
And I'm having a little bit of, I don't know, memory or deja vu to a few decades back when we were having this conversation, not you and I personally, but we collectively were having this conversation. And at that time, there was a lot of angst over intellectual property of solar panels. Now that's now moot. They're cheap enough and they're all over the market. But as we're talking of these new technologies, this is of course looming, another intellectual property discussion, if not, battle. And we've just seen it play out with vaccines. How are you looking at that aspect, or what's the strategy here?
No, the strategy with respect to what aspect of it?
Well, in other words, if companies or certain entities are developing these technologies, what's to stop them from charging premium prices? Yeah.
I think the same rules that have applied historically. I mean, the first to the market. I mean, we do operate within a free market, free enterprise system. Governments have always played a role in that, either by creating a structure, i.e. tax incentives, tax deductions, benefits, or direct grants, where governments help shape a desired policy outcome. But in the end,
can that happen fast enough to meet the 10-year mark?
Well, it has the ability to. Will it? Depends on with the money that is appropriated by governments to the task. In the end, Katie, no government on the planet has enough money to affect this transition. Look at the difficulties that have existed in just summoning $100 billion from government budgets. And it's difficult because there are a lot of pressures on every country in the world. But, and here is a capitalized exclamation point, but, the private sector does have that money. There are literally trillions of dollars under management, parked in some cases in net negative interest historically in recent years. There's a great deal of money chasing good projects and good deals. And I believe the private sector has the ability to win this battle for us. And that's in effect what is happening with philanthropy, where Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and different people are chasing solutions and putting serious money into those efforts. Intellectual property is intellectual property. The law is pretty clear in most places, and in most places, not everywhere, it's been respected. I think there is a race to that technology right now, and whole countries are very fixated on this, believe me. People understand that this is the largest market the world has ever known. It's the energy market of the future. There are 4.5 to 5 billion users today. That will grow to some 9 or 10 billion in the next 30 years. And it's a multi-trillion-dollar market already. So you're not even at startup. It's not there are venture capital components of it, but it's not the most frightening playing field within which to try to find some solutions now, because country after country has already made a commitment. The demand is there. And so the market will be there. And people are chasing the new fuels, the clean fuels, the new construction materials, the containment or capture of carbon in the industrial process. There is green steel now being produced. There's green cement now being produced. This transition is well underway. And I've said to many people who ask me, well, what happens if the United States elects someone who tries to reverse the policy in the future? No politician anywhere in the world can reverse what is happening now. It's underway, and the private sector understands it. And you're now seeing shareholder, stakeholder debates about responsibility. You're now seeing disclosure, financial disclosure in the long term enter into the marketplace, because there are risks in the investments that are made that have not considered climate and climate outcomes. They will now. We have new satellite technology that provides a transparency and accountability to what nations and companies are doing. So it's possible now for a satellite system to track the entire supply chain of a global international corporate entity. And so there's no hiding anymore. And I think as a result, there's going to be a very different level of both investment as well as outcomes that we're going to see.
So that's interesting. On the national level, of course, you've just landed this joint declaration of joint agreement with China, which was announced in Glasgow last month. But looking at this agreement, which itself was, instrumental in buoying hopes at the talks and making it, two carbon superpowers are at the table, gave a lot of people hope. But if you look at the draft, of course, it's a little weak. It's a little wishy-washy. It's similar to the same declaration that was done in April. And I'm wondering what your idea is for getting China to kind of put some meat on those bones. How do we make this agreement more robust?
Katie, in fairness, I don't think it's that. I don't think it's either weak or missing specificity. Are there some paragraphs in it that are generic? Yes, inevitably, that is true. But it does two things that I think are critical. Three things that are critical. Number one, we've created a working group between the United States and China, which will have experts participating. And we will be talking as of this week. We're already engaged in putting that together. And that group has the ability to depoliticize some of the arguments on the table, to bring expert opinion from China and the US. And if we agree, if both Chinese and American scientists are agreeing and experts are agreeing on something, I think that will have an impact on Beijing and it will have an impact on Washington. And so we have an ability to be able to get in to each other's commitments and put them to test together. Secondly, it has a very specific outcome on methane, where China has signed up to join in next year a new proposal, a national action plan, literally an ambitious national action plan, which they must make public and file with the COP27 by next November. So within the next year, China must come up with a methane strategy and make it public. That's very specific. And thirdly, they have agreed for the first time to accelerate the effort on phasing down coal. So they will, with a specific year, beginning in 2026, they will begin to accelerate the phase down of coal, and they will try to accelerate that and make best efforts to do so, working with us and with others in the context of the working group. So China and the United States have now come together in a very serious and openly accountable way through a working group to work with each other to try to get where we need to go. And I believe China will peak in its emissions sooner than has been predicted. And it's quite possible that if we come up with new technology or a new way of doing things, that this could be greatly accelerated and make a huge difference to the world.
Great, thank you so much. We are running out of time. So I wanted to thank you so much for speaking with us and for your work on climate change. And that is it from us. Is there anything else that you wanted to say to the public?
No, thank you very much. The only thing I'd say is this is doable. It doesn't have to be frightening. Some people are sort of scared, don't know what to do. Am I going to have to change everything I do? No, we can have a better quality of life doing these things that we need to do, having smart grids, managing energy better, cleaning up pollution. Greenhouse gases are pollution, methane, and carbon dioxide. We have 10 million people a year on the planet who die every year because of the pollution. If we start cleaning that up, if we have clean sources of energy, we will be living in a cleaner world, in a safer world, in a healthier world, and far more secure world in terms of international security. Because if we don't do those things, the collapse of agriculture, the lack of water, the droughts, the movement of whole populations around the planet, that is hugely destabilizing. And we still have an opportunity to avoid those worst consequences.
you so much.